Hello everybody, welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you very much for joining me here today because today I've got a rather unique review here for you. For many of you guys that know, the type of reviews that I do on this channel are mainly just scripted movies, scripted television shows, but never in a million years did I ever think I would ever be reviewing a dating show. And today I'm reviewing the Peacock original show called X-Rated, hosted by the wonderful Andy Cohen. And the basic premise of the show is rather simple. So a contestant is trying to find true love, but they know there's some things that they're going to be needing to work on that they felt like they've lacked it in previous relationships, but at the same time also bring more awareness of other areas that they probably weren't aware of that they need to be working on. So they bring over their exes to provide some insight as far as what their strengths were in their previous relationship and the areas that they've also lacked in, and hopefully provide some tools necessary for them to be able to develop those skills to improve on, and then hope to have a much more stronger and long-lasting relationship with whomever they may find true love with. And that is pretty much the show in a nutshell. And they also have an expert on the show as well too, a YouTuber slash author, sexologist, intimacy and relationship expert by the name of Shan Boudram, who I didn't know who she was beforehand, but she definitely provides some really sound advices about what these contestants can do to really work on these areas that they've lacked in, or like I said before, we're not aware of, that they need to improve upon to have a much stronger and better relationship moving forward, whether it be with their former exes or with someone else entirely different that they may come across in the future. So again, that is the premise of that show in a nutshell. So to provide a bit of a background about how I got into reviewing this show, Patrick had reached out to me a few weeks ago and had asked, would you be interested in checking out this show called X-Rated for Peacock? And I said, absolutely, I would love to watch it and I'll review it. Not knowing a single thing about the show at all. I'd never heard of the show. I did not know what it was even about. I just assumed that it was a scripted television show. So when I saw the trailer, I was really surprised to come to find out that it's a dating show. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do this because this isn't what I want to watch. I don't want to watch this stuff and then review it. It's just not my cup of tea. So I was about to message Patrick to let him know that, hey man, thanks for asking me. I know I said yes before, but I changed my mind. This is not what I want to review. Thanks, but no thanks. But I had told myself, go back and watch the trailer. And if you don't like what you see from start to finish in that trailer, then you have a better understanding of what the show is about, and you can actually make a much more sound decision to let Patrick know why you changed your mind. So I watched the trailer, and this time I was actually paying attention to it, because the first time I saw it, I was rather dismissive. I just saw a dating show, and I was like, nope, that's all I said. I didn't even bother watching the rest of it. So upon watching it the second time around, I was really surprised to find out that I was way more interested than I ever anticipated. And the concept and the approach with this dating show was really unique. I actually did like it. So I said to myself, if I like the first 3 episodes of this show, I will review it. Turns out, not only did I like the first 3 episodes, but I liked the entire first season. I grew to be a fan of this show because each episode, for the most part, got better and better. And I connected with the show in a lot of ways that I just did not anticipate at all. And to my surprise, I could not believe that I had forgotten this, but I used to love these shows as a kid. Like, I remember I lapped this shit up like ice cream. I loved it. And I could not believe that I had forgotten all about that. Like, it's like I buried that memory back in my memory bank somewhere and had forgotten all about it. Because when I was watching this show, I was like, holy shit, I used to love watching shows like this. I loved Blind Date. There was a show on MTV, I forgot what it was called off the top of my head, but I'm sure I'll have the image for you guys to see. And several other different dating shows that were coming out at that time when I was growing up. Like, I was obsessed with those shows. Like, I really, really did love that. And I don't think that many people really know that about me. I think my wife may know to some degree. I think I watched some of those shows with my brother at times and my sister. I don't remember if she even noticed it. But I was obsessed with those dating shows. Like, I loved those shows. And this brought me back to those times as a kid watching these shows, because it gave me a perspective about how people really are, as far as how they like to approach things and how they give off this impression of who they are. But then some of the kinks in the armor starts to be exposed along the way, and you realize that, sometimes they're putting on an act, and then there may be a certain honesty that they have during their experiences with their date on the show and sharing their stories. And something about that was really unique, and I just loved it. And this show reminded me a lot of those times of when I was watching those shows when I was a kid. So there's a lot that I've taken away from the show that I just did not expect at all. I've already explained what the basic premise are. So for right now, we're just going to get right into it. We're going to get into my positives, and then we'll be getting into my negatives. The first positive for me is the host, Andy Cohen. Now, I was very familiar with who Andy Cohen was prior to this show. I know that he was a host on his own TV show and a few other things as well. But that was really the extent of my my knowledge about him. And I've seen some clips of his show online that he currently hosts that I actually did like. But again, that was the extent of my awareness of him. But upon watching him in hosting duties on this show, I am now a fan of Andy Cohen. This guy has a wonderful personality. Like, I mean, a really great personality. I can see why they had asked him to host this show. And he is awesome. He's very engaging, a very likable person, and you can see that a lot of these contestants really like him too. Like, they connect with him, they're opening with him, they're conversing with him about their personal experience, and he gives a little bit of insight about his experience as well too along the way. And he really knows how to manage hosting duties and keeping things moving forward and highlighting some things about the contestants to bring more awareness or to point out other areas that he's more knowledgeable in to include in the conversation, and also question them as well too about certain things that they bring up that kind of was slightly glossed over. He's like, hold on one second, let's backtrack a little bit. Talk about that part again that you just mentioned there. Like, he's really good at that, and my God, he is amazing. I mean, really, really good. I am a fan of Andy Cohen. The other positive for me about this show has to do with the explosivity that is in the show in terms of, the language that they use and the explicitness about the contestants' sex life. Really delving into about how contestants like how they get blowjobs or how they like to have sex, and they use other terms that I personally am not familiar with, like eating cake. I had no idea what that meant, but what was interesting is that they put a caption as far as the word and what the use of that phrase or word means in that particular community or under those contexts. So I thought that was very helpful for someone who, like myself, who had no idea what half the stuff even meant. And then they also go into details about other fetishes that some of these contestants have, about spitting and that they don't swallow, or that there's a top and bottom thing, which I'm not really familiar with, to be completely frank, in the gay community, I should say. And it really was very educational in that regard. Like, I was very surprised to learn a lot of things that I was just not privy to at all. And when I was a kid growing up watching these dating shows, there's a lot of things I had learned in terms of like how relationships actually work. And I was very aware of that sort of stuff because of watching these dating shows. Now, granted, some of the stuff is a little exaggerated for the purposes of television, I would say. And I kind of more or less got the same vibe on this here too. But I felt like there's more authenticity behind what the contestants and their exes are talking about, and providing some really good insight about what they do and what they don't like, and what they like and what they don't like. I thought that was fascinating stuff. And you also get to see a vulnerable side with a lot of these contestants too. There was one particular contestant who was bragging about how he was really good in bed. He was well endowed, and he was talking about he had a really big dick, and that he felt like he was really good on all these categories that they were asking him to rate himself on, in terms of kissing, sexual performances, oral sex, whatever else. And he was giving himself a really high score. But when they would be asking his exes about what he was actually good at, the things that he was really good at were more about, like, I guess, really being a likable person. But as far as, the sexual performances are concerned, he was lacking. They thought he was very, very, very low standard when it comes to that sort of stuff. And then to his surprise, he was like, holy shit, I had no idea, because all he kept thinking about was himself and what he wanted, and they just obliged. And I thought that was very interesting. And every single one of them were very open about their experiences and sharing with him what they liked and what they didn't like. And he had come to realize that there was a lot of things he needed to work on. And one of the things he needed to work on was paying attention to his partner, paying attention to what they like, what they didn't like, and really being, in tune with them, like really paying attention to the other person. And that was something that, you picked up on with this guy, that he gave this illusion or this perception about how he looked at himself, but the exes were more or less saying, no, it's not like that. And when it was consistent across the board, he was like, holy fuck, I have a lot to work on. And you saw that he actually was come to realize that he was not the person that he perceived himself to be. And with this wake-up call that he has, you realize that, you know what, I have to fix this and I have to work on myself. So there was a vulnerability and honesty that I saw in that particular episode with that contestant that I really found rather intriguing, and I thought, this is really cool. I hope it's like that with every episode, and it pretty much was for the most part. But you definitely get a lot of different variations as far as the likes and dislikes and what the consistent problems is with each particular contestant. So there was a lot to absorb here, and the great thing about this show is that it's only 30 minutes long. It doesn't really go beyond that, but yet you're able to feel the impact and focus on the areas that they're trying to highlight, to really point out that are rather interesting. So a lot of really fascinating stuff that I had learned a lot about and had made me more aware of, and I became educated in the process as well too. Did not expect that at all with this show. The last thing I want to point out with my positives is that this show was a lot of fun. I did not expect to enjoy the show as much as I did, because again, my expectations were rather low. Even though I watched the trailer, I thought it was really interesting. I didn't really have high expectations for the show at all. But to my surprise, I had so much fun with it. But not only that, it's very funny, but it's also very educational too. There are some things I just was not aware at all, especially when it comes to sexual terminology that I just was not privy to. Didn't know half of that stuff meant. But again, providing the captions to explain what the words mean and how it's used under those contexts, it made a lot more sense to me. So I understood on what they were talking about, which was really, really helpful for a guy like myself. So I thoroughly enjoyed the show a great deal, but there are some things about the show that I actually did not like at all. So this is a perfect segue for me to get into my negatives. The first negative for me is kind of I don't know if it's a real negative, but it's just a preference of mine. And that has to do with the fact that there is no audience in this show at all. It's just the contestants, the host, the specialists, and some people maybe behind the scenes that are holding the camera, whatever else. I'm used to having an audience when it comes to these type of dating shows, because you get a reaction out of them when you're hearing the stories that they're sharing. You're hearing the action go, oh, whoa, woo, yeah, something about that really keeps you engaged, and almost it's like you feel that energy in a weird way, hearing the audience react to these stories, and I think it's really fascinating. I felt like that was a missing element to really amp up the show. Now, it didn't take away from my enjoyment in the show at all. I'm not saying that, with that missing, it made the show less interesting, less entertaining. That's not the case at all. It's just a personal preference, because I'm used to watching these type of dating shows with an audience, because having the audience react to these stories really adds a certain element to it that keeps you engaged. Like, holy shit, wow, you're kind of getting a feel for what everyone thinks in that studio. But considering that this was shot during COVID, I have no doubt in my mind that that's the reason why they don't have an audience there. I'm sure if it wasn't for COVID, there may have been an audience, and I think it would probably added a little more oomph to the show. But again, the show is entertaining as it is on its own without the audience. But I felt like that was something that was missing, and it really could have helped adding a certain element that I think a show like this really deserves, in my opinion. The next negative for me has to do with some of the contestants, I should say. Not all of them, some of them. And I wish I remembered all the names off the top of my head, but there were a few contestants that I just thought their story was just okay, as far as what their experiences with their previous exes, as far as how they've handled the relationship and the outcome of the relationship. Some of those stories were just okay for me. There was really nothing that intriguing about them. But what kept the episode interesting was the other things that I thought made the show really good. Andy hosting the show, asking the questions, showing interest and really keeping things more engaging. And then some of the things that they were also going through, as far as like trying some new things that they probably were lacking in, and showing, hey, if you try this is what you could try to do. So do these things and let's see how you feel about that. And Andy participating in that to made that segment of the show rather interesting. So those things really kept the show entertaining, in my opinion, with some of the guests that I thought were just okay as far as the entertainment value with the story. But overall, that's really about it with that particular aspect of the show. My final negative has to do with this segment and where Shan Boodram, the expert on the show, provides an exercise for the contestants some of the exes that are on the episode, and also in some cases even Andy. Now, the segment itself where they provide these exercises for the contestants, I felt like were some of the weakest points of the show. The only thing that really kept my attention was getting the reactions from the contestants, hearing their thoughts, and then Andy commentating on it and his participation and hearing the jokes that he throws in. And then even in some cases when Shan is providing some really wonderful insight as far as the whole purpose of this exercise, that was really the only interesting thing about it. Really, for the most part, that's like the weakest part of the show for me. There were some exercises where the actual segment itself was really exciting, was really interesting, really engaging, but I would say, honestly, maybe 80% of the time, I was just not that interested in that. I was more interested in everything else but those moments. But again, the other elements to help keep my attention were there, and it has to do with the people that were participating and, providing some excitement and some interest to keep my attention. But really, that's kind of where my negative ends as far as the show is concerned. So this is going to be a perfect segue for me to get into my rating. So as I've already mentioned before, that I had no intention in wanting to review a show of this nature, because my intentions are to review scripted films, scripted television shows, and talk about that. And the idea of reviewing a dating show or game show, whatever the case may be, I had no intention at all. It never even crossed my mind to consider doing that. So as I said before, when I first saw the trailer, the first 15 seconds, I was like, I have no interest. I'm not going to review it. But thankfully, I went back to check out the trailer again, and I was rather interested. And then watching the show, I was very, very interested, very entertained, educated at the same time too. And I walked away feeling connected with a lot of things that were presented, especially when it came to the vulnerabilities with these contestants that had this certain perception about themselves, and then were exposed as far as what the realities really were. And they had no idea because they were just consumed with what they wanted to see and hear, more or less. And seeing that and seeing them having to reevaluate themselves right in front of you, it's a very interesting thing to see. And it's a very authentic thing to see too, under those circumstances for a show like this. And I thought that was really unique. I really did like that. And as I already mentioned before, some of the things I didn't like, I hope that if there is a season 2, those areas that I thought that was weakest in the show, they will improve upon in season 2. And if there ever is a season 2, I would go out and watch it, because I thoroughly enjoyed season 1, and I just hope that season 2 is better from there. So I highly recommend the show. So as far as my rating is concerned, I would give this show a raise the glass. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, share and like our videos, and don't forget to hit that notification bell while you're down there. And follow us on our social media accounts. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And if you haven't heard already, I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, where I talk to people in the industry such as writers, directors, actors, producers, comedians, musicians, and everyone else in between. So make sure you check out the show, and also follow the show's social media accounts as well. We have an Instagram page at You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I thank you very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Make sure you check out X-Rated on Peacock. And if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to that streaming platform and you tell them Rob sent you. And until next time, everybody, stay safe out there and cheers.